the most dominant tennis player of all time, treated like a criminal by the country he'd won 9 titles in, booed by crowds while serving for championships, erased from promotional materials by the sport he built, questioned by journalists who would never dare ask his rivals the same things. This is not a victim narrative. This is a 15-year pattern documented across hundreds of press conferences, thousands of articles, and millions of hostile interactions that no other champion in any sport has been forced to endure at this scale. And now, the people inside tennis are finally saying what fans have screamed for over a decade. His own coach, Wimbledon champion, years inside the operation watching how media constructed narratives around Djokovic versus how they handled Federer and Nadal. The assessment from someone who saw everything firsthand is devastating. A respected British analyst admitting on camera that tennis media manufactures villains and then filters every action through that predetermined lens. Once the label gets assigned, nothing changes the story. Not 24 slams, not 400 weeks at number 1, not a career that statistically dwarfs everyone who came before. The question isn't whether bias exists anymore. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is why it started, how it's maintained, and what it reveals about institutions that claim to celebrate athletic excellence while punishing the greatest example of it. Djokovic arrived on tour as the entertainer, the charismatic kid from Belgrade who did impressions of Nadal's serve routine and Sharapova's grunt. American crowds at the US Open loved him. He was funny, accessible, and seemed destined to be a fan favorite alongside the established stars. Then he started winning, not just winning occasionally, winning consistently, winning against the players the tennis world had already crowned as its permanent kings. And that's when everything changed. The sport had already chosen its narrative before Djokovic became a factor. Federer was the elegant genius. Nadal was the warrior with the heart of a lion. Their rivalry was supposed to define an era. Sponsorship deals were signed, documentary projects were greenlit. The GOAT debate was supposed to be a two-man conversation that generated decades of content and merchandise revenue. Djokovic was supposed to be the challenger who made things interesting without actually disrupting the established order. He disrupted everything. He beat Federer at Wimbledon 3 times, in finals, on the court that was supposed to belong to the Swiss maestro forever. He beat Nadal at Roland Garros, multiple times, on the surface where Nadal was considered unbeatable. And instead of celebrating the emergence of perhaps the most complete tennis player ever produced, the coverage shifted. The entertaining kid from Serbia became the villain who ruined the preferred storyline. Murray competed against Djokovic more than 30 times. He knows exactly what Grand Slam pressure feels like, and his assessment confirms what the footage makes obvious. Djokovic has faced consistently hostile crowds throughout his career in ways that Federer and Nadal simply never experienced. The 2019 Wimbledon final remains the clearest example. Federer had 2 championship points. 15,000 people were willing him to convert. The roar when Djokovic made errors was deafening. The silence when he hit winners was pointed. Djokovic won anyway. He saved both championship points and took the 5th set in a tiebreak against a hostile stadium. And afterward, he described what that experience actually felt like. Fighting against the opponent and himself simultaneously. Feeling like everything in the stadium was working against him. Describing a Grand Slam final as an out-of-body experience because the psychological pressure extended far beyond the man across the net. That's not normal. Champions aren't supposed to feel that isolated at the pinnacle of their sport. And instead of the coverage celebrating the mental fortitude required to thrive under those conditions, media focused on whether he celebrated too aggressively or made inappropriate gestures toward fans who had been hostile to him for 3 hours. The deportation crystallized everything wrong with how Djokovic gets treated by institutions that should be neutral. Whatever your personal views on vaccination policy, the intensity of media hostility was extraordinary. Djokovic was detained in a facility alongside refugees. He was interrogated for 8 hours. Officials woke him at 4 in the morning. He was deported from a country where he'd won the tournament 9 times and been beloved by Australian crowds for over a decade. The overwhelming narrative in Western coverage wasn't concern about due process or acknowledgement that the situation was complicated. It was celebration. The villain finally got what he deserved. Justice served against the man who thought rules didn't apply to him. 3 years later, a man with 24 Grand Slam titles still experiences genuine psychological distress when passing through Australian customs. He admitted on camera that he checks whether immigration officials are approaching, that he wonders if they're going to detain him again. That admission should generate sympathy. A human being describing lasting trauma from how he was treated. Instead, coverage framed it as Djokovic playing the victim, seeking attention, refusing to move on from a situation he created himself. He came back the following year and won the tournament, his 10th Australian Open title. One of the most emotional victories of his career, given everything that happened 12 months earlier. And somehow, the narrative still found ways to diminish what he accomplished. The double standards become impossible to deny when you examine how identical actions receive completely different coverage depending on who performs them. Federer smashes a racket and the coverage treats it as a humanizing moment. A rare display of emotion from an otherwise composed champion. Evidence that even the greatest feel pressure sometimes. Djokovic does the exact same thing and it becomes a referendum on his character. Evidence of instability. Proof that he lacks the mental composure of true champions. Questions about whether his temperament prevents him from being considered alongside the greats. Same action, same sport, same competitive stakes, opposite framing. Nadal has engaged in extensive time-consuming rituals throughout his career. His pre-serve routine is legendary. The towel placement, the hair touching, the shorts adjustment, every single point for over 2 decades. The coverage treats these as charming superstitions, endearing quirks that reveal his competitive intensity. Part of what makes him a beloved champion. Djokovic takes a few extra seconds between points or calls for a medical timeout, and suddenly he's accused of gamesmanship, faking injuries, disrupting his opponent's rhythm through tactics that violate the spirit of competition. The accusations fly immediately, despite zero evidence of actual rule violations. Because the narrative was established long ago and every action gets filtered through that lens. When Federer won his 20th Grand Slam, the tennis world declared him the undisputed greatest of all time. The coverage was unanimous. Magazine covers celebrated the achievement. Commentators declared the GOAT debate settled. When Nadal reached 22 slams, the narrative positioned him as the ultimate competitor. The warrior with the lion heart who refused to let his body or his rivals defeat him. Legacy cemented forever. When Djokovic passed them both and stands alone at 24, major publications ran articles questioning whether statistics capture true greatness, whether likability factors into GOAT calculations in ways that trophies can't measure, whether his achievements are somehow less meaningful because of how he won them or what he said while winning. The framing is explicit. Federer's greatness was declared at 20 titles. Nadal's legacy was cemented at 22. Djokovic at 24 still needs to prove something, still needs to answer for perceived character deficiencies, still needs to overcome a narrative that was constructed before he ever won his first major. The bias extends beyond individual journalists to the sport's governing institutions. The ATP's 2024 season poster featured Alcaraz, Sinner, and Shelton. The tagline was, "New season, new era, new attitude." Djokovic was ranked #1 when this poster was released. The most accomplished active player in professional tennis didn't appear in official promotional materials for the season he was leading. ATP's own website reveals the pattern through language choices. When Sinner won a 3-set match after dropping the first set, the official article praised his steely resilience. When Djokovic won in straight sets against a lower-ranked opponent, coverage emphasized how he survived and was thoroughly tested. Same platform, same tournament, same organization supposedly celebrating both players equally. Radically different framing that shapes how readers perceive the performances. The question itself reveals everything. A reporter suggested to Djokovic that he spent his career chasing other players. First Federer and Nadal, now Sinner and Alcaraz. Djokovic pushed back immediately, and he was right to. The framing ignored 15 years of dominance between the peak Federer-Nadal era and the emergence of the next generation. 15 years where Djokovic won more slams than either rival, spent more weeks at number 1 than anyone in history, compiled winning head-to-head records against both Federer and Nadal. Reducing all of that to chasing isn't journalism. It's narrative enforcement. It's keeping him in a subordinate position regardless of what the actual scoreboard shows. Rusetsky defended him publicly, acknowledged on camera that the coverage has been unfair for years, that certain players receive protection while others get designated as targets. Coming from a respected analyst embedded in tennis media, that confirmation is significant. The 2025 Australian Open demonstrated the dynamic perfectly. A Channel 9 broadcaster stood in front of Serbian fans and mocked them on live television, called Djokovic overrated, called him a has-been, said kick him out while laughing at people who had traveled across the world to support their champion. Djokovic refused to participate in on-court interviews until Channel 9 issued a public apology. He took the microphone himself, thanked the fans briefly, and left. The crowd booed him for breaking protocol. Coverage questioned whether he was being over. He explained his reasoning directly to fans, bypassing the traditional media channels that had demonstrated hostility toward him for years. The response revealed how audiences are shifting. Millions of people endorsed his decision to bypass hostile gatekeepers. The idea that athletes need traditional media to reach their fans is collapsing, and outlets that built influence on controlling access are discovering that their narratives face real-time challenges from people who watch the same events and reach different conclusions. Djokovic has been remarkably gracious when discussing why crowds favor his rivals. He credits Federer and Nadal's charisma, their longevity, their impact on the sport. He acknowledges that arriving in their era meant competing for fan support against established favorites. What he doesn't say, but what the evidence makes clear, is that the deck was stacked before he ever had a fair chance. The narrative was written, the heroes were cast, and when he refused to accept the supporting role, institutions that profit from preferred storylines turned against him. The press doesn't hate Novak Djokovic because he's done something unforgivable. They're uncomfortable with him because he refuses to cooperate with the story they want to tell. He won't pretend the coverage has been fair. He won't perform gratitude for treatment that hasn't been gracious. He won't accept the villain role that was assigned to him and make their jobs easier by confirming their characterizations. Instead, he keeps winning. At 38 years old, he just beat the two-time defending champion in a 5-set war that ended after 1 in the morning. He saved 16 of 18 breakpoints against a player 14 years younger who was riding a 5-match winning streak against him. He keeps showing up at Grand Slams and producing performances that demand recognition regardless of how they get framed. Every trophy he lifts becomes another piece of evidence that the narrative was wrong all along. 24 Grand Slams, 428 weeks at number 1, 100 ATP titles, the career Golden Slam, Olympic gold, every major record that actually measures greatness on a tennis court. The press can frame it however they want. History will remember what actually happened between the lines, and no amount of hostile coverage can change the final score.